Hi there, my name is Lauren Renzetti, and today I'm going to show you about how to do a reduction print in soft linoleum. So my inspiration is an onion. My drawing for my inspiration is an onion, and I'm going to show you the basic steps of how to go from beginning to end creating a reduction print, and I hope you'll join me. So I've drawn out my onion and I have a piece of linoleum here, and what I'm going to do is there's one side that is a bit rougher and one side that's smoother. I'm going to use the smoother side. I'm going to be placing it directly on top of my paper, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually flip it, and I am going to burnish this side of the page. So what it's doing is it's creating all of my drawings, so I don't have to draw it again, directly onto the linoleum. And the thing that's nice about this is it actually is reversing it for me, so I don't have to worry about it being backwards in the reality. If I was doing words, that would be a real issue, right? Okay. So it's not a bad likeness, it's actually pretty good. And what I'm going to do is just strengthen some of these lines. Next step is to figure out what I am carving and what I am leaving. I'm actually going to leave pretty much this entire onion, but I do want to get rid of the surface behind it. I have 3 cutting tools, and they have numbers on them, and I don't know if you can see those numbers, but basically inside this little cutting tool there are numbers, and these are 2s and 1s. 1 is very, very tiny on the inside. 2 has a little bit more of a line. It's a bit higher, so I can go a bit deeper with it, but the angle is almost exactly the same. It's just that this one does a tinier amount. So I'm going to be using my tool, holding it in the palm of my hand like this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to work away from the actual linoleum drawing and work into just the paper, just the outer edge. And the trick with this is that I am actually turning the linoleum, not my wrist so much. And you always want to be working away from the interesting bits, the parts that you don't want to carve away. And the reason being that if you slip by accident, you don't want to carve away something really important. If you're doing a portrait, you don't want to carve into the face and then lose the nose or something. So that's what I'm starting with. And the other thing to consider is when you're carving, to be mindful of the shapes that are inside the drawing. Like I've got a lot of spikinesses, so I want to have a lot of spikinesses in that. And this has got a nice round curve to it, and so I want to have a curve maybe echoing on the outside of the carving. When you get to the edges of things, there'll be a little bit of a tug, and so I actually just use my finger as a place so that it doesn't tear the edge of the linoleum. Now, within this outer edge, I don't have to remove completely. What I could do is I could actually leave some marks inside there that are very similar to the shape that's happening on the outside, and so that's something that I am going to do. When you get to edges, the challenge is it might just completely slip off, so you want to take your time with that. And the beautiful thing about linoleum is that you want to make sure that you are trying to carve it as beautifully as possible. So taking your time and really thinking that you might even be creating something like a ring around it, as if it was even a woodcut. And so you're creating your own grain. It has absolutely no resistance if your carving tool is sharp. And there might be areas that you don't like and so yes, you can carve them out afterwards. But what I like to do is I like to start off with a fairly full image with a lot of surface to start with, and then work it out as I'm reducing the surface. As you're carving, it's important to know that you can't put it back. It needs to, so taking away less is better than more. Okay, so this is what it looks like, and now I'm going to print it. I'm just using white ink. I'm taking a little bit of it and putting it on the brayer, and I'm lifting and rolling. Now this is a very, very stiff brayer. It's very, very hard. Listen to the sound. That's a good sound. I have my plate. I have my paper, and what I've done is I've created a template that is going, this is the size of my paper, this is the size of my print plate, and what I'm going to do is this is to help me keep my paper really clean. The other thing that would be really good is to have a sponge that's wet, or a cloth that's wet, so your hands stay clean. Right, so there's the cloth. Okay. So first step is I'm going to take the ink, creating an ink bed. It doesn't need to be too big. And then I'm going to roll this ink on top of this surface. Now this is going to be a test print. So the very first print you do, you need to put at least 3 layers of ink on. And you want the ink to be tiny little dots, not big globs. So this is quite a smooth surface, not a lot going on with it. Okay, and I've got it on a piece of felt because I find I really want to get all of the design in there. And now if I just press down with just my fingers, I'm only going to get finger marks. So you want to actually press down with your whole hand. And if it was a bigger piece, I would actually flip it over and I would burnish it. I'm going to take this off now. Now this is a really subtle white. It is white on cream, and so it is not super easy to see, which is not great for demonstration. So I'm going to actually change the color of it, and I'm going to add a touch of brown to it. A reduction print, one of the things to consider is the amount of ink you're using. It will be more ink in the beginning, less later. But also the thing to consider is the values of the colors. So I've got a really nice creamy yellow here. It's very, very white. It's got more white in it than yellow. So now I'm going to put the ink on, and I'm going in both directions. And their print. Now test prints could just be on newspaper. They don't have to actually be, or newsprint. They don't have to be on good paper. But because this is my first pull or my first image, and the thing is that when you're experimenting, it's a good idea to try lots of different colors. Don't just stick with just one color, because the odds are when you're reducing the surface, you can't go back. You can't put things back on it. So having a few different test colors is an important aspect. And you don't have to do this template idea, but it is a good idea to sort of set up where it's going to go, because you want to make sure that it's placed really nicely in the surface of your paper so that there's a nice border around it. That's even better. Now you can go darkest to lightest or lightest to darkest, or you can intermix. If you're going to be adding white to things, then you can go back and forth, and that makes for quite an interesting print. The white of the page is a pretty good place to start with, and you would actually be taking the white out of your print. Now I have not done that yet, simply because I'm not really sure what colors I want to use, and I don't know how much of the white of the page I want to have in there. So I'm starting off with just some test prints before I even do too much more reducing of the surface. Okay, so I'm going to try one more print in this step, and then what winds up happening is you wind up making quite a few of your first color and playing around with that color, and maybe even making additions of 10 of each color. And so you might wind up with 50 or 60 prints to start with that are just the undertone. And then you keep reducing the surface of the lino and reducing and making the color a little bit stronger and darker. So this is actually really pretty good. I'm pretty happy about this color. This is really close to sort of the oniony color. And so what I can do now is I can decide what will become white. And I could print the white on top, which I think I might actually do. I might go with the darker colors first and go from darkest to lightest. And the other thing to consider is when you are printing, you want to keep some of your source colors that you started with and the mixes, and you can intersperse those mixes into your next print, and that will create what's called homogeneousness. Homogeneous is when all the colors are related somehow. Now, obviously, if we're just using the three primaries, they're all going to be related, but in this case, white is my main base color. And I'm going to try this print on the darker paper and see how that looks, and then I'll also try it on the white. And that's another strategy too, is to have different colored paper in the background. White, you don't have to go white. You could go into some really bright colors and have something muted on top, and then that would have a really nice aspect of it being kind of like a pop art feel. So that's got quite a bit of ink onto it. I'm actually going to try this without putting too much more ink on. I'm just going to go really fast. With the first layer, you do want to make sure that it has very tiny dots. If it's really thick and gunky, then you'll have those raised areas for future layers, and you really don't want to have that. So that's an aspect to really consider. Okay, and I didn't actually get right to the edge here. I don't know if you can see. There's a bit of a jump right there where my thumb is. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place this down again, and I'm going to really press down in that area. So if you get the registration just right, nope, didn't. Didn't get it just right. If you get it just right, you can fill it in. If it's not just right, what happens is you get this layering where it's moving, and that can be kind of interesting, but that's not what I was going for. Okay, so that's your first layer. Figure out what colors you're going to use, what color paper you're going to use, and then print a whole bunch of them, right? 10 or 20 or 100 or a million or how many you want. And then we'll go to the next step afterwards. So I've been pretty busy. I've been using quite a few colors here. I have a bunch of different greens and greens and browns. Green on its own, sort of a taupey color. And I actually was running out of ink. The ink was actually drying out on me. So I have ones that are very, very dry, almost missing color. And then I have some really, really light ones. And then white, almost white. So what I've started doing is I've looked at using the stamp again, and I've carved a little bit more away, and I've started using it as a second pass, right? So there's a second line going on here. Now, one of the things that you can think of doing if you're not sure of what colors to use, you can print on a piece of acetate the colors that you're interested in, and you can lay it on top of it and see what's going on with it. And that's a great strategy if you're not sure what's going to happen. The other thing that you can do with that is you can use your next layer and you can decide, do I want it to be flush and right on top of, or do I want to offset it and have it move just a little tiny bit, right? And so that's another thing to consider, and that's what the acetate is really great for. Okay, so I'm going to print this one other image that I have going on here. I'm just going to move the camera so you can see the ink. There we go. And I'm going to use two colors this time. I'm using white with beige in it, and I want it to kind of go into a lighter beige, so I'm rolling my ink back and forth a bit so that it's a bit different in value. There's some light and dark. Not very dark, but a little bit dark. Now, in this case, I don't want to turn it this way because I want to keep this side lighter, and I'm not going to reverse it. So I have to kind of keep doing it in the same direction. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place it on here. Now, I could trust my border and my edges, which is really what I should be doing, but I am also going to look at the edge of the plate and where the ink is residing and try and line it up as well, and then just press it down. We've got another color going on here. Now I have to decide, do I want to do this on any of the other ones? So I'm going to put more ink on it, and I'm going to just press it onto a piece of acetate. And it's, when you're doing it on acetate, you want to use quite a bit less ink, so that's almost too much ink. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a look at how would this look. Because it is an onion, so I want it to be an onion. I think that that's too white. I think it's taking away too much. So I'm not sure if I really want to have that much removed. And I want to have more of this print in there. So I don't think I'm going to actually do that. I'm going to take more away before I actually go ahead and print it. But I'll look at one more here. So that's kind of nifty, but I do think I don't want to have that much ink on my surface. I want to reveal more of this. So if I want to reveal more of my undercolor, what I have to do is I have to actually remove some of the ink from this by making more lines in it. So that's what I'm going to do now. So each time I'm carving away, I am following lines that I have drawn in pencil. But the other thing that can happen is as you're carving, you can be carving right beside lines that already exist. Now I'm not there yet because I still have too many lines that I have not actually taken away yet. But that is what happens in sort of the third step. But the second step is to start revealing where you want to have these darks be. Now, my challenge is that if I remove the top of this, I've got some of my images are lightest color first, and some of my images are darkest color first. This is not necessarily recommended because it's pretty hard to discern then which areas to get rid of. So you do have to decide pretty much right from the get-go what you'll be taking away, whether that is the printing starting with the dark and moving into the light, or starting with the light and moving into the dark, because it winds up being a very different strategy when you are printing. When you're mixing, it's always a good idea to, like I have one that is a solid green. I have a couple that are solid greens or more green in them. And so what I want to do is I want to actually have that as the parent color. That's pretty neat. I kind of wish that there was a little bit more curve happening in there. So I think I want to see what it looks like on other ones. So I'm going to do a tester, and I'm going to have this curve a little bit more this time. Placing it on here. So now I have a sort of better sample of what it's going to look like, and I think I want to try it on this one. It's still pretty bold. So you can make it really subtle where there's not too much of a difference in value, or you can make it really bold. Because these are quite light, I'd like to keep it really light. So I'm going to actually add a substantial amount of white ink to both of these. And the easier strategy is to actually put the white ink, start with the white ink, and then move into the darker ink. Now I could test it by just putting it on a piece of acetate and then hovering it over the other colors. So I'm going to do that before I even get into putting it on something else. So I've put just a couple of dabs right here. Now the problem is that this is almost exactly the same color as that for this one, but the green is pretty good. So I think what I'll do is I'm gonna, before I change it up too much, I'm gonna print these ones with just the green. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Pretty happy with that. That's kind of a fun grouping. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm actually taking even more away. And I'm not necessarily making new channels. What I'm doing is I'm taking away pieces within channels that already exist, and I'm making those channels wider. So the paint or the ink that I'm going to be using is going to be in relationship to the color that already exists beside it. So here is my stamp. So now you can start to see the development of 3 values going on in here, right, in these areas. I could take even more away and then you'd see more layering. Do it again. Could try that with a piece of acetate, and then I could see what that's going to look like on other areas. So yeah, that one's pretty cool. I could do that one. I could do that one. That one's pretty cool. So the green will show through. This one's almost too faint. That's very subtle. I think I want to do that one. Alright, so I've carved more away, and now I'm using almost pure white, and I've decided to put in a tiny bit of gold in the tops and in the sides of the outer edge. So this print already has a lot going on. It might be too much, but you know, it's worth trying. The worst that can happen is it's too busy. So this is my 4th layer, and in this one it's actually a few colors. So that is definitely too busy. I should have taken more away earlier. But it's not bad. It's all a question of what you like. So I'm going to do it now with this one, and I'm actually not going to, I don't think I'm going to use any gold. Maybe only use gold. I'm going to try that. I'm just going to only use gold and see what. But not bad. So each time I'm printing, I'm taking more of this surface away. The more surface I have removed, the more it will reveal what's underneath. And that's the process.